All righty. See some people starting to funnel in, which is awesome. We're going to let this build up for the next minute or two. We'll give a quick intro about Bionic, myself, Justin, and Malcolm, and we'll jump right in because we got a ton of information and great information to cover in this session. So hold tight while you're here. Drop in your LinkedIn where you're calling in from, and as well all questions drop into the Q&A. If we get to them, I'll stop Malcolm for those questions. Otherwise, if we can't, we'll answer all the questions, and we'll send it out via email post session as well.
Seema, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Did.
Hi, Mary.
All right. Got like 16 people, starting to build up nicely. I'm going to give a quick intro just because Malcolm's got a ton of great information to cover, and we're really excited to dive in with him. So I don't want to take too much time away from him because we'll probably use the full hour. We have linked my LinkedIn account in the chat, as well as Malcolm's and his ideal deck format and teardown. We'll also send all that information out via email post this conversation. This is all being recorded. We'll also send out the recording, any extra Q&A, as well as any information separately. And by attending this session, Malcolm has graciously afforded a 20% discount on his services for the pitch deck. I think everyone would have a great opportunity to have at least a conversation with him after this discussion. So we're going to jump in here. So this is our third incredible community chat brought to you by Bionic. I'm truly excited about this one. When I was building our deck for Bionic and working with others, I was Googling around trying to find great new deck formats and things that kind of popped off the paper to me that were super useful and helpful. I was able to find Malcolm's pitch deck coach outline and teardown. I thought it was extremely useful and valuable information in terms of how he presented the flow of the deck, as well as all the insights and information. I quickly connected with him via LinkedIn. We had a chat, and I loved his approach, all the real life world experience he's had building companies, scaling companies, as well as now helping companies raise. He's helped companies raise over $300 million off the pitch deck that he's developed. He's also been someone that's been in the startup seat as an exec or founder with 6 exits, including a $1 billion IPO and $11 billion secondary. So he's someone who's walked the walk and talked the talk, and is here to help founders build their vision and bring their mission to life. And that's really paramount to the value proposition that we at Bionic are really trying to bring forward. The current economic environment is extremely complicated, and it's already difficult and complex world to navigate with startups. We need to decrease burn, we need to extend runway, and most importantly, we need to build a business rooted in fundamentals. And one of the key ways to do that is really nailing your vision and being able to present your product clearly and concisely to investors, so you get the time with them and make it effective, and hopefully be able to secure that fundraising to extend the runway and build your business. At the heart of it, Bionic is a collaborative that's bringing the early stage startup community together, from founders to operators to our partners. We're a collective focused on building more durable companies with sustainable and scalable growth to reach product market fit faster. Startups are hard, so we're here to help break down the walls because we go further together. Quick background on myself, and then we'll jump in. I've been in the startup ecosystem for 20 years, building marketing and product functions at the very beginning, scaling 2 companies to over $1 billion in exits. I've been an active angel investor with over 15 active portfolio companies and 2 unicorns. And I'm most excited about early stage of building, experimenting, and scaling. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Malcolm to talk through his pitch deck coach deck.
All right, thank you, Justin. We have a lot to cover, folks, so I am going to talk very quickly. Um, but everyone will get a copy of the video, so you can always play it back a little bit more slowly. So without further ado, let me just reduce some of these Zoom screens that are cluttering my desktop. All righty, so a pitch deck template for early stage startups. I will be the first to tell you that two things. One, there's no such thing as one size fits all template, but I do think this template is as good as any for early stage startups. And I do recommend that you use a template because it will at least help make sure that you answer the right questions at the right time in an appropriate flow for investors. Now, a template won't make a great pitch deck. A template will help you organize your answers to questions, but it's how you answer those questions that really makes the difference. Justin already gave the intro about me. You can certainly read about so I won't spend much time here. Into the deck, you got to take a step back, and a lot of people just dive in and they start building slides, and they don't have a plan and they don't have a goal. And you just got to be crystal clear on the goal and how you get to that goal. And the goal is you want investors to read your deck and ask to continue the conversation, right? And if you don't get any callbacks from your deck, you're either sending the deck to the wrong investors or you've got a bad pitch and you need to rethink that pitch because it's not generating the callbacks that you need. So how do you do that? Well, you got to give investors what they're looking for. What are they looking for? They're looking for high reward and low risk, right? High reward, it's got to have the potential to generate the return that they need for their size of investment. For a large VC, they're looking for $1 billion exit. For smaller investors, it might be a smaller number. But at the end of the day, everybody's looking for the most upside with the minimum risk. And there's really three risks that investors are worried about, right? They're worried that there's no market for your product, or that your product is not competitive, or that your team doesn't know how to get the job done. So conversely, a great pitch deck really sells A, the market, B, the product, and C, the team. Most pitch decks focus way too much on product and don't spend enough time talking about the market and the team. And we've all seen the slides about why startups fail. It really boils down to one of three things. It's a bad market, nobody wants what you're selling, or it's a good market, but your product is not competitive, so nobody wants your product, or you've actually managed to build a good product for a decent market, but you don't have the folks in place and you're not executing and you can't turn that opportunity into a great business. Common question, how many slides do you need? Just enough to proactively answer the questions and objections that sit between you and our goal, which is the investor calling back. So you're typically sending this deck ahead to get a call back, and you're not there to pitch the deck. So the deck has to proactively answer all the obvious questions. And so when you think about a pitch deck, think about it as a bridge between you and a callback, and you're having to bridge all of these questions and objections. And so as we go through this deck, we're going to be thinking about the questions that each slide is supposed to be answering. Another thing to think about is when thinking about how many slides you need, and it's just enough, your deck is such a dating profile. You need to share enough information to get that date, to get the investor callback, but you don't need to just spew out every detail about your business. Save that for if and when you get a chance to meet with the investors. This is my recommended flow. In particular, the first three slides are a little bit unique, I think, to my recommended flow. A lot of stuff you'll see there is fairly familiar, but I really recommend an investment highlight slide is slide 2 and a team slide is slide 3. And I will explain why I make that recommendation in just a moment. This is what that deck looks like. You'll notice there's not a lot of information on this deck. Again, it's a dating profile, just enough information to get that first callback. Notice as well that the titles stand out. You could look at this deck on your phone and it would pass the iPhone test, meaning an investor could be standing in line at Starbucks and they could actually scan through your deck and actually have a decent idea of what you're pitching. All right, so let's go. And again, remember, each slide, we're answering common questions about your problem, solution, market, competition, and so So we're going to review those questions before each slide. And if it's not obvious to everybody, Gleamer is a company that I have made up. It's not a real startup. It's just there to make the recommendations tangible, right? A template that doesn't provide a worked example, I think, is less useful than a template with a worked example. So that's what we've got here. All right, cover slide. So there's three things that you have to address very, very quickly with the investors. One, what do you do? Two, is this an interesting opportunity that they'd like to invest in? And three, is your team a team that they would like to back for this opportunity? And two and three do not go together. They may love the opportunity that you're presenting. They may love the product. They may love your product idea, but they don't love your team. They don't think you've got what it takes to get the job done. The first thing we have to do, though, before we can even start to explain the opportunity and the team, we need to establish context. And that context is, what do you do? What's your product category? Who's your target customer? What's your primary use case? And if you don't answer this on your first slide, you're already lagging behind the best pitch decks. So here's a cover slide. Let's break it down. All right. First thing, what do you do? It's a consumer app. So now we know what the product category is. What's the primary use case? Mobile auto details. So now we know what it is. It's a consumer app. We know it's for consumers, and we know it's also for local auto detailers, so local service providers. So we've got that information. We're also adding some extra detail just to make it really clear and obvious, right? The primary use case, consumers can get a professional auto detail on demand at their home or office. So on the first slide, they don't have to get to slide 5 to figure out what you do. You very clearly state what you do on that first slide. And you can even include a little bit of differentiation. You'll notice I say the first consumer app, not just a consumer app. Other things to include on your cover slide, obviously the logo, screenshot or a visual support what you do and who you help. And then something that I think is very important, people need to know what this deck is about, and they need to know if this deck is recent. So is this a 500K friends and family pre-seed round, or is it a $2 million seed round? And is this a pitch deck that was built 6 months ago or 12 months ago, or is it current, right? Include the date. And I always like to use quarters because that allows you to not have to constantly change the date on the slide, and be very clear on what this pitch deck is all about. $2 million seed round pitch deck, right? So immediately an investor can qualify you in or out based on their firm's investment criteria. Yes, we invest in consumer apps. Yes, we invest in marketplaces that connect consumers to local service providers. Yes, we write $2 million seed round pitch checks. And so this feels like a fit, and I know what they do. So we've addressed that first hurdle, which is, what do these guys do? The next slide that I always recommend that most people don't include is a highlight slide, right? We need to just give the investor a quick summary of what's to come in the rest of the deck. Right? It's like a table of contents or a TLDR slide, and you're just answering all the key questions. Is the market big enough? Is the product big enough and good enough? Is the team good enough? And so on and so forth. Let's take a look at this slide. Okay, so here's the slide. Let's break it down. Okay, every single slide should include the topic, which explains the topic for the slide, and then the key takeaway. Now, this one's not so obvious. It makes more sense when we look at the problem solution, but it's just good practice to have the slide topic in small font and a key takeaway in big font. In this case, the title is Why Invest in Gleamer. Obviously, include your logo on every slide, include a slide number on every slide, and include a footer that reminds folks what this deck is. Now let's go through the detail. First of all, there's 6 highlights for your investment highlights. The first one is, it's a big market. In this case, it's a $2 billion market, and we've got first mover advantage. The second highlight is we have a robust product. The third highlight is we have great traction. The fourth highlight is we have an experienced team. The fifth highlight is that we've got pretty interesting revenue by the end of 2026, and we can get there on pretty nominal market share. And the fourth highlight is a reminder of how much we're raising, with a little extra detail on how we're going to raise it. It's going to be a SAFE with a 20% discount. So second slide in, first slide, we told the investor who we are, what we do, who we help. And now we've given them 6 really good reasons to lean into this deck and keep reading and pay attention. And obviously, each one of these highlights is a detailed slide to come. But why make the investor create a mental checklist of reasons to invest in your company when you can just give them up front like this? All right. The next key slide is the team slide. And too many people leave this slide to the end of the deck. But think about it, right? The investors are investing in a great idea and a great team. And if you wait until slide 10 before you introduce the team, they're going to be frustrated because the team will make or break their level of interest in this slide. You're essentially applying for a job. You're saying, give me this money, and the job I will perform for you is to build a product and establish product market fit and start scaling a business for this opportunity. So you need to explain why your team is the best team for this opportunity. Have they solved similar problems in the past? Have they built similar products in the past? Have they worked in startups before? Have those team members worked together before? Remember, each slide is answering questions for investors. So you got to have a plan for each slide. And the plan is understanding the questions that the slide needs to answer. So bear in mind these questions. Let's look at the team slide. So first of all, we always start with, hey, it's the team slide. It tells you in the top left corner, but that's not the title. The title is, hey, we have deep experience in SaaS and auto detailing. Probably should say consumer apps. But the key point is we have a team that has the relevant experience and expertise for this opportunity. We also need to highlight who is the business leader and the tech leader. So we've got our founder, CEO, and we've got our chief product officer. We need to highlight all of the previous experience that is relevant to this opportunity. Now, this Gleamer happens to be a marketplace that connects consumers with local service providers. Well, Thumbtack does that, Yelp does that, HomeAdvisor does that. So these folks have had senior positions at companies solving similar problems. They've also got a team of advisors that also clearly bring relevant experience and expertise to the table. So the combination of the founding team and the advisors says, this is a team that can probably make the most of this opportunity. And then a little pro tip, always include logos for the relevant companies that these folks have worked for in the past. Just provides a nice quick visual summary of why this team has relevant experience. All right, the next slide. Now, this is a slide that everybody does at slide 2. This is slide 4. Now, we've established the context of who we are and what we do at a high level. We've established the size of the market. We've established the product and the team. Now we can start going into detail, right? So the first detail slide is the problem. What problem do we solve? Who do we solve it for? What are the biggest pain points? Why hasn't this problem been solved before? Why do current solutions suck? And if it's relevant, or rather, if you've got the information, how big is the problem, and is the problem getting bigger? So let's take a look at a problem slide. So let's break it down. Always a key takeaway. So in this case, we've chosen to say the key takeaway, the one thing that you should remember is it's hard for consumers to get a mobile auto detail on demand. Now, in this particular case, we have two stakeholders, consumers and detailers, and it's actually detailers that pay us. So in hindsight, I probably would have changed this problem to traditional marketing doesn't work for detailers. So pick the problem statement that is the most relevant. All right. Then you need to identify the stakeholders. In this case, I have two. We've got consumers and detailers. Identify the big problem for each one of your stakeholders. An easy way to get a professional, affordable auto detail. Detailers are wasting too much time and money finding customers when they should be detailing cars and making money. And then take each of the problems and explain why is this a problem, right? What are the problem drivers for the two stakeholders? And it's very important to explain what these problem drivers are, because these are the reasons why current solutions suck. And on the next slide, which is the solution slide, we're presumably going to introduce a solution that solves all 6 of these limitations. All right. So think of the problem slide as setting up the solution slide for you. Okay. So the solution, what's your solution to the problem? What is it? Is it an app? Is it software? Is it a device? Is it a combination? What are the unique benefits of the solution? Are those advantages hard or easy for others to copy? It's not enough to be better than the competition right now. You've got to have a sustainable advantage, otherwise you won't take market share or you won't maintain market share. So here's our solution slide. Again, we've got the topic in the left corner. The key takeaway is the first consumer app for auto detail, so we know what it is. And then we identify the benefits. In this case, for consumers and detailers, each of these benefits ties directly back to the limitations of current solutions. So you're essentially saying, here's 6 things that we do that current solutions don't do. And that's what makes this solution a great solution. Justin, how are we doing? Is this coming through okay?
Yep, you're doing great. Yep.
All right, excellent. Okay, so let's get to the product slide. Again, what's our game plan for the product slide? Don't just spew information. Think about the questions that you're trying to answer with your product slide, the investor questions, right? They want to know, how does it work? They want to know what it looks like. And if it's a product that needs to integrate with other systems, which is typically true, for example, for SaaS products, how does it integrate with those other systems? All right. And just keep it super, super simple. Here's a couple of, in this case, because I have 2 stakeholders for Gleamer, consumers and detailers, we've got 2 different screenshots. So the first one says, here's how it works for consumers. And this one says, here's how it works for detailers. So our 2 different stakeholders. And then we just break it down into really simple chunks of information, right? If you're a consumer, you can use our app to browse detailers, compare reviews and prices, or compare. And if you're a detailer, you can use it to build and manage your profile, you can accept jobs, and you can track your earnings. So a nice high level, we're just explaining how the product works. We're not going into detail, right? This is a dating profile. The detail on how the product works will come when we do a demo, if and when the investor asks us to come in for a chat. All right, competition. This is a slide that's typically very poorly done in investor decks. You need to clearly identify your competitors, both direct and indirect, and you have to clearly explain how you will beat them and the advantages of your product that will allow you to beat them have to be difficult to copy, and they have to be important to customers, right? You can't just list advantages to your product, differences between your product and existing product, if those differences aren't relevant to customers, if they won't drive a purchase decision in your favor, if they won't help you dominate your market. Remember, we're going to size a very large market. For the investor to be excited about the opportunity, they have to see a very large market, but they also have to see a product with sufficient relevant differentiation that that product will take dominant market share, right? Because the only companies that investors want to invest in are companies that can dominate a market. You can only dominate a market if you have a sustainable competitive advantage, and the only market the investors care about are big markets that are growing. So you need both of those things to be true for you to pass the market and product test. So let's take a look at a competition slide. Again, what's our key takeaway? So you don't even have to read this slide. I'm telling you that we win on coverage, traction, and user rating. So again, what's the key takeaway for the slide? And then use the body of the slide to simply support and amplify the key takeaway that is the title to the slide. And as we break this thing down, and there's several ways to do this. This is the we do it, they don't version of a competitive slide. You can do the matrices, but the 2x2, but I feel like this is a little more credible. It gets into a little bit more detail. So the first thing you have to do is you have to list all of your credible competitors, and you have to list incumbents, right? How do people solve this problem today? What products are they using? That might include, by the way, no product. It might include a manual process. You can certainly compare and contrast against that. And you've got direct and indirect competition, right? So, a new direct competitor might be another startup that's doing the same thing as you. An incumbent might be a legacy product that does what you do, maybe as a standalone product or as part of a larger product. But think through all the different products that your customers are using or would consider using to solve the problem if you didn't exist, and that's what you need to include on this chart. The second thing you need to include is the points of differentiation, right? Now, you cannot just put the things that make you different on here. Each of these points of differentiation have to be features or attributes of your solution that would compel a customer to pick you over. It's not so much a feature comparison, it's more a kind of a more holistic comparison that says, hey, we've got 4 times more detailers to choose from. We've got 4 times more people using our app than anybody else. And we've got ridiculously good apps, customer satisfaction ratings in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Now, if you were a SaaS or a more technical product, then you might pick different solution attributes to compare and contrast. But whatever you pick, make sure it's the top 3 or 4 must-have solution attributes that a potential customer would use to pick you over the competition or to compare you to the competition. And then obviously do the comparison. All right. So think about what we've done, right? We've explained what we do at a high level. We've given the investor a quick summary. We've basically anchored in their brain. We've got a big market. We've got a strong product. We've got a solid team. We've got great traction. And now we're going into the detail. We've drilled down on the problem. We've drilled down on the ideal solution. We've shown what our product looks like. We've shown how our product compares to the competition. Now we need to explain 2 basic questions. How do we make money and how big could we get? So the first, and by the way, you cannot answer the how big can we get, which is the market question, without explaining how you make money, because a proper market sizing is always bottom up. And I'll explain that in just a second. All right, so the business model slide is how do you make money? How do you charge customers? And on what basis do you charge them? Is it per traction? Is it per transaction? Is it per user? What is it? Right? And keep this thing simple. If you've got one revenue stream, one major revenue stream, just include that. Don't include every possible revenue stream. Just include the 1 or 2 revenue streams that you'll launch with. So let's take a look at an example, right? Again, this is the business model slide. We include the topics so the investor knows where they are. We've got our slide number, we've got our footer. But the key takeaway is, if you remember one thing about our business model, remember that we get paid 15% for each mobile auto detail. That is the headline for how we make money. Now we make that tangible. Again, remember the content of each slide. The purpose of each slide's content is to simply support and amplify the key takeaway in the title. In this case, we're using an average transaction to illustrate the 15%. Now, this is a very simple example, but I've yet to see a revenue model that we can't boil down to something that's almost as simple as this. This one is super simple, right? The customer pays an average $75. The detailer keeps $63. We keep $11. It's 15% rev share. If you have more than one revenue stream, then you can include 2 here. For example, I had a company a while back. They were charging a SaaS fee for their platform, but their platform included a marketplace, and they were taking a 15% transaction fee on every dollar that was sold through their platform. So those were their 2 different revenue models. And so we had 2 sections on this slide instead of 1. Now, once you've explained how you make money, now you can do a credible bottom-up sizing of your market, because this is how we make money. And the next logical question is, well, how much money could you make if you had 100% market share? We know you won't get 100% market share, but we want to size the market, so let's do the math. So that's what we do in our market sizing slide. Again, the questions, what are we answering? We're answering the question, how big can you get? And I really, really encourage you to use very simple math here. How much money do you make per customer per year? And how many of those customers are there in your initial target market? Because if we multiply those two things out, we've got your market opportunity for your initial target market. So here's our market slide. Again, we've got a headline that says we're tapping a $2 billion market. So we're not just calling this slide market. We're reminding you that it's a $2 billion market in the US only, and clearly it's probably another 2 or 3 billion for the rest of the world. And we're doing a very simple bottom-up calculation. In this case, we're saying there's 180 million mobile auto details per year. On average, they cost $75. So the total revenue for mobile auto details per year is 13.5 billion, and we take a 15% rev share, so we've got a $2 billion market opportunity. And that's just a very simple way of explaining why you've got a very big market in a way that investors will understand. The whole TAM, SAM, SOM thing, where you just start with these huge markets that aren't remotely relevant or only slightly relevant to what you do, just aren't credible. This is a very clean, credible way of sizing your market. Now, the actual data that you use, obviously, you know what your average revenue per transaction is, but if you're going to, in this case, I'm quoting the total number of mobile auto details per year and the average cost per detail. So anything that should be supported with a credible source should be sourced. And you can see here that we're sourcing those two counts. All right, so we've done the problem, we've done the solution, we've introduced the product, we've explained why we're better than everybody else, we've explained how we make money, we've explained how much money we could make if we had 100% market share. Now we need to say, well, how have you guys got, right? So this is where we do our traction, right? And what you include on this slide will depend on where you're at, right? If you haven't built a product, then I would want a lot of hard data on potential customers that you have surveyed that agree with your assessment with the problem, that agree with your assumptions on the ideal solution, and express a high degree of interest in your proposed solution. So traction for a pre-product startup might be just proof and validation of your assumptions. If you've actually built a product and you've got some customers, then you can obviously use actual customer engagement and traction metrics, right? So let's take a look. In this case, Gleamer's been going for for 9 months. Again, we don't just say traction for the title. The one thing we want you to remember is we're growing like crazy in our first 9 months, and then provide the detail. So show and tell. In this case, we're showing the growth in the number of users. We're showing the growth in the number of detailers. Those are the two stakeholders in this particular startup's world. And we're showing growth in revenue. And then we're showing some traction here in terms of customer satisfaction. You might actually do NPS. If it's a SaaS product, you might do NPS surveys. If it's an app, I might not only include the user growth, but I might use something like daily active users and monthly active users to show that people are not only buying or downloading the app, but they're also using it, okay? So that's a traction slide. And what goes on here is going to be very specific to your business and your stage. But pick things that basically say we've either thoroughly tested our idea and we're ready to build a product, or we've built a product and we've got early product market fit. People like the product and they're continuing to use the product once they try it. Okay. Now we need to talk about how are you going to grow. Customers, how are you going to activate them from trial users, for example, into paying customers, and how are you going to retain them? Because a successful business is a business that can acquire and retain customers profitably at scale. So how are you going to do that? And you've really got to think about it in 3 ways, right? How are we going to acquire customers? How are we going to keep customers in terms of keeping them happy? And I break that out into customer service and products. So strategy, interested in the growth strategy, and then break it down, right? And try and be as specific as possible with these strategies and tactics, right? Don't just, this is a somewhat high level when it says SEO, paid search, paid social, but the refer a friend discounts, loyalty programs, employee incentive programs, those are much more specific. And we've got some pretty specific examples of tactics for customer service, and the same again for product. And if you are already doing some of, executing some of these tactics, for example, if you're a website that sells SEO services, and one of your acquisition strategies is to provide a free scorecard for somebody's website, talk about how many people have done the free scorecard, how many of them converted to customers, and what's your conversion rate, and what's your CAC to LTV for those customers. So try and add as much detail as you can. And again, that will obviously depend on what stage you're at. So that's our growth strategy. Now we've got to explain how we're going to compete, how we're going to maintain and extend our competitive advantage, right? And when you think about a product roadmap, don't just think features. There's also going to be things like certifications, right? Most SaaS products selling to the Fortune 1000 are going to have to be SOC certified, so include any relevant certifications. And depending on your product, it may or may not need to integrate with other systems or other apps. And so those integrations also need to be included on the roadmap. So here's our roadmap. And it's just a simple timeline, and just make sure that it's not just product features, it's anything else that's going to enhance the desirability of your product in the eyes of your customer. All right. We're almost there, by the way. We've got about 3 slides left, and then we'll take a few questions, and then we'll take a quick look at a deck and do a high-level teardown. All right. All right, so now we're on to our financial slide. And really, the investor wants to know, how quickly can you grow? How big can you get over the next 2 to 3 years? And you don't have to show a P&L here, right? You can just summarize your growth and offer to provide a detailed P&L if and when the investor wants more detail. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm pre-revenue, I'm pre-product. It just doesn't matter. Nobody cares about the numbers. Well, they do. The numbers will be taken with a heavy pinch of salt. But assumptions in modeling your revenue for the next 2 to 3 years, and your assumptions in modeling your operating expenses, your product development payroll, your marketing and sales payroll and program costs, your customer support costs, all of these things will tell an investor if you are basically financially literate. So it's how you build a model and the assumption that you use to build the model that are more important than the actual numbers if you're pre-product, pre-revenue. Obviously, if you're post-product, post-revenue, then it's the quality of the revenue and its churn numbers and a lot of other things. The key takeaway here is we're going to get pretty big in the next 3 years, right? 29 million is a decent size. It's on the way to the 50 to 100 million that the largest investors are looking for, because that gives them the potential for a $1 billion plus exit. If you're talking to smaller investors, then this number doesn't need to be big, but basically tell people how big you're going to be over the next 3 years. Don't make them guess, right? They need to know, you're going to be 3 million by the next 3 years or 30 million. And also, be very clear on how little market share you need to get to this opportunity. And this is why it's important to do a good bottom-up calculation of your market opportunity, because it allows this number to be very credible as well, right? Any startup that could get to 30 million in 3 years, would be a pretty rare startup. Most of them don't do that. And to be able to get there on 1.5% market share, it would be pretty comforting to an investor. Now, this is essentially the promise that you're making. You're saying, this is what we're going to do over the next 2 or 3 years. Your go-to-market strategy and your product roadmap and the product solution, the problem, solution, product, competition slides, all provide the how you're going to make it happen. But this is like the tip of the spear. All of that is going to boil down to this revenue growth on this market share. Okay. And then our last slide, but one, is how much money do you want? Have you raised any money before? Who did you raise it from? What did you do with that money? What did you achieve with it? I don't want to know how you spent it. I want to know what you achieved with it in terms of product growth, customer growth, revenue growth. And how much money do you need now? And why are you asking for that number, right? So don't just pull a number out of thin air. You should have, between your P&L and your burn profile, you should be able to say, I need this much money to fund the next 2 years of the operating plan that I can share with you on request. And I'm going to spend that money on the operating expenses that I've included in my plan. And specifically, I'm going to use it to fund the strategies, payroll, and tactics that I discussed in my go-to-market slide and the product development that I introduced in my product roadmap slide. Okay. So here, the headline, right? We're raising $2 million. It's a seed round. It's a safe. We've already got 500K committed, 1.5 million remaining. Include that if you've got it. Here's what we've raised in the past, 300K from friends and family. It was pre-seed. And here's what we did with it. We built and launched our MVP, and we grew revenue from 0 to a 1.5 million revenue run rate in the first 9 months. That's pretty good for 300K and sends a strong signal to the investor. How much are we asking for now? Well, we want to raise a $2 million seed round. It's on a safe. We're going to offer a 20% discount to investors. There's a $15 million valuation cap. And we're going to use this to enhance our platform to fund the next 2 years, which will get us to 600,000 users, 18,000 detailers, and $29 million run rate. So being very, very specific on what you will achieve with the money. How you will spend the money is in the OpEx section of your P&L. Okay? So once we've done that, I like to include the investment highlights again, right? Tell them when you include this at the beginning, you're telling them what you're going to tell them. We're going to tell you about a big market, a great product, strong traction, experienced team, interesting revenue growth. Then you told them, right, in 10 or 12 slides, and then you summarize, right? Because you want the investor to say, wow, this is interesting. Remember our goal. Our goal is to get a call back from the investor. Maybe the investor needs to run it by other members of the team. You've just given them six kind of bullet points that they can just copy paste into an email or a Slack and say, hey, let's bring these guys in. They're looking at a $2 billion market. They've got first mover advantage. They've got a pretty robust product with a couple of patents. They've got amazing traction. The team has tons of relevant experience. And they're raising a 2 million seed, which is right in our sweet spot. So you're just giving them the bullet points that they would need to justify to themselves or to somebody else in the firm to bring you in. So I like to include that as the penultimate slide. And then the last slide, of course, is who do they contact with questions? And this should always be the CEO, and just provide all the relevant information. Obviously, include a link to your LinkedIn profile, and make sure everything on the LinkedIn profile for you and every member of the team that you included on your team slide is consistent with the information on your team slide. Too many people have a team slide that's completely disconnected from their LinkedIn profile, and they look good on the team slide, and then you go check the LinkedIn profiles, which is the first thing an interested investor is going to do, and the information doesn't match. So absolutely make sure that information matches. All right, we did it. A lot of this information, in fact, most of it is available on my website. So just go to pitchdeckcoach.com, drill down on pitch deck template, and you'll basically get a slightly more verbose version of what we just went through here. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, Justin. And I know I went fast there, but hopefully that was helpful to folks, and maybe answer a few questions, or we can get into Abesh's deck, whatever you prefer.
I think, yeah, let's do, there's one question, there's two questions that are the same, and then we could jump into Abesh's deck for a real life example too. So both of them are kind of in the same vein of, would you also use this for pre-seed startups that are raising angels and family and friends? It feels like it may be geared to, companies with greater traction. Do you think this example for Gleamer could be used for early stage companies as well.
Yeah, so the only thing that changes really is the traction metrics, right? If you think about it, you still need to clearly identify a big problem, a unique approach to solving that problem with sustainable competitive advantage. You still need to compare yourself to the competition. People still care about how you make money and how much you can make. The only thing that really changes, the structure is the same. It's just that the traction is different, right? You've got your traction should be more about to what extent have you validated the assumptions that are driving the product that you're asking me to give you money to build, right? Convince me that you've done your homework and that you're not asking me to fund research. You're asking me to fund an idea that has been thoroughly vetted and validated. But the elements of a pitch are consistent across stage, but obviously some of the content changes if you're pre-product, pre-revenue, post-revenue, post-product market fit scale.
And then one other quick question, then we'll jump in. Let's say you're a solo founder. How does the team section work um, in that case?
Well, you have to have, remember, for an investor to call you back, they've got to love the idea. It's a great idea. We think the company that is the market share leader for this idea could be big enough for us to invest in. The second question is, but is this the team that we want for this opportunity? You may simply alert them to the opportunity and they go find another team. You got to have a great team. And if you're in the early stages of building that team, then obviously you're not going to share this pitch deck with investors, but you should build a deck and use it as a tool to communicate your idea to co-founders and advisors and early members of the team, right? Because at some point, you've got to build that team out. You're unlikely, unless you're an ex-Google, Facebook, Amazon superstar, you're going to have some degree, you're going to have at least a business guy or girl. You're going to have at least a product leader and a couple of advisors that have built and sold startups in the space are pretty useful. So you've got to recruit them. So build the deck and use it to sell them on your idea and your opportunity and build out that team. But at some point, you got to have a team slide that's more than just you, unless you are simply presenting this to friends and family. They actually know you and they trust that you will build out the rest of this team and they're willing to fund you. But for everybody else, you're probably going to have to build at least the skeleton of a team before you're going to get money from strangers.
Awesome. I think we have a couple other questions, but let's jump into the deck just to use a real example, and then we'll answer the other questions post session if that works for you. Or if you want to answer questions, we can keep going.
If you guys have questions, please submit them, and I'll provide a written response to Justin, and he'll share it with you. So yeah, let's go take a look at. Let's see if I can find it.
Hey, Malcolm, Abash here. Could we actually, I'll send you a link if you can access it in the chat. It has the updated version of the pitch deck. My apologies. It's the newest version.
Go ahead.
All right, let me know if you can access that.
I can.
I already have so many things that I want to change and overhaul for this deck, so it'll be fun going through.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Here it comes. You guys see my screen?
If it loads. Yes.
I think what I'm going to do, Abesh, is I'm just going to download it as a PDF, and that should make it faster for me to drive through it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And by the way, pro tip, always send a PDF to investors and don't make them provide information to read your deck. You need to make it as easy as possible for people to read and share your deck. Let's see. No, that's not the one we wanted. Did I download it?
I think it was downloading right then and there in that folder.
Oh, was it?
Still in the process of downloading now.
You're right.
Just might take a little bit.
There it
There
is.
we go. Yep.
Excellent. All right. First of all, love this slide. Love to see the team logo. The first vertically integrated plant care consumer platform. Quite like that. I do like using a reference, right? Chewy for plant parents. I've got a visual that kind of tells me what it is. I actually did take a quick look through the deck, and essentially it's a consumer app plus a kind of a plant health tracker. This is the plant health tracker. So I would be tempted. I love to see the Shark Tank reference. This feels a bit techy for me.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps it's the leading consumer app and health tracker for plant lovers, something like that might be a bit more plain English. And I might perhaps have the app, maybe somebody holding the app and looking at the plant gets across that it's an app plus the device. But this is pretty good. Do like to see the Home Depot thing. Missing is this is a pitch deck to raise this amount of money. So as an investor, I don't know, right? I need to qualify this in or out, right? I've got another 20 decks to look at. If this guy's raising 500K for a seed round, that's no good because we do $2 to $5 million seed rounds. And so putting that information on here allows them to qualify you in or out. Presumably you've done your homework, so it'll qualify you in. And I would put a date on here as well. So I'd make this a little bit easier to understand. I don't quite get this either. Honestly, my first thought was this is like Fitbit for plant lovers, right? There's an app. There's an app that's community app. We can talk about our plants. It also allows me to track the health of my individual plant. And there's a device to also help me track the health of the individual plant. But a strong slide. I love the visual, but I'd probably make those few changes. Love getting the team slide in here. I would do the highlight slide. The team is clearly one of the big things that I care about, but get the highlights before you get into the detail. We've gone high level, and then now we're diving into detail. And I feel like the highlight slide, it's almost like a table of contents. It bridges the gap between the cover, who are you, what do you do, who you do help, and what's to come in the rest of the deck. So I would recommend a highlight slide. You know, how big is the market? Is it 2? Is it 20 billion? You know, it's a consumer app plus a plant health tracker would perhaps be the product. Traction might be the number of downloads and daily active users. Team would be a summary of this slide. Traction would be, or projections would be how big you think you can be in 3 years. And then you just repeat the funding ask, right? We're raising 2 million on a seed. So all of that information just sets the context for the detail that comes starting with this slide. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
Then
we put our traction slide a bit later. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, traction's different, right? The summary slide, traction is one of 6 points on the summary slide, right? The summary slide is market, product, traction, team, projections, and ask. So this is good, right? At the end of the day, the team is applying for a job, and that job is to build and scale IoT device. So instead of SaaS, I might actually say consumer apps, because really it's a consumer app, right? It's not a SaaS. I mean, it is, but it's more of it's more Fitbit than SAP, right? Okay. But I love to see the logos. The Shark Tank thing is great. Shark Tank founder is very interesting. I'd want to have a conversation with you just about that. We've clearly got the guy who's the business leader, or the person, sorry, and the person that is, you know, so here's somebody that owns the business vision. They deeply understand the problem space, and they're basically driving the vision. and this is the individual that appears to have all the right credentials to turn that vision into a product. And then we've got some advisors here. What I'd probably prefer to see here would be people that either have, again, if I use my Fitbit, right, I'd want to see people that have been very successful building a business as similar to yours as possible. And your business is a consumer app that has both a personal tracking and a community element, plus a tracking device. So Plant Link, not sure what that is. Great North Face, Timberland, definitely big names. Not sure about Dynatrack and Reverb, but that might just be me. Okay.
Yep.
So I like that you're using titles. I would just use a nice little subhead. Just tell the investor which slide they're on. You're on the product slide. You're on the problem slide. You're on the solution slide. You're on the why now slide. So it only has to be teeny tiny font up here, but it provides the context for the key takeaway. All right.
Yep.
Here, I'd say there's a little bit too much. Consumers are investing heavily into plants and gardening.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts, because one of the things you mentioned was, in these slide decks, we're trying to raise common questions and, points that investors bring up in calls. And one of the ones that people have brought up is just questioning, one, the market size, but also if interest in plant care and gardening is like a sustainable trend. Is it something that was temporary in terms of COVID? That's come up quite a bit in terms of just investor pitches, where I would say it's at least 20% of pitches that question pops up. Maybe it's not big enough of a pushback or question to warrant its own slide, but maybe I could combine it with the following one or two slides to make sure that it's addressed.
Well,
because I think you're right. This is a lot of info in just one slide.
My first inclination would just be to cut the left side out. Simplify this, change the scale so this looks more dramatic, and just basically say, the key message is consumers are investing heavily into plants and gardening, and the subheadline is, and that has only accelerated. COVID was a catalyst, and that interest has only sustained and grown post-COVID, right? So you'll remember what I said about the deck. You're proactively answering common questions and objections. So if you realize that this COVID thing is always an objection, then you need to counter it more aggressively on this slide, and make it kind of the key point. Does that make sense?
That does. Yep.
Yeah. So we don't need this detail, and it feels too granular, right? It took me a while to figure out even that this was individual. This is the key point, right? Remember, every slide, one key takeaway, and then the content of the slide is just 1, 2, or 3 chunks of information that support and amplify the takeaway, right? So this does both. You could kind of I might even put COVID here and show that it's just skyrocketed post-COVID, and then you're kind of nipping that little plant analogy. You're kind of nipping that objection in the bud proactively. Justin, we're at 11. I'm more than happy to keep going. Do you want to keep going or what?
I'm happy to stay. I have extra time. If people want to hang out, by all means, please do so. And otherwise, we'll send out the recording to everybody. So
great, yeah. So if you manage to stick around, thank you. Otherwise, you'll get that recording from Justin. Yeah, I think the problem that this is what's interesting about templates, right? Because templates are good for identifying the question that you should answer, but it's how you answer the question, how well you answer the question, that really separates a great pitch deck from a not great pitch deck. And just simple things like, what problem do you solve and who do you solve it for? Yes, consumers are investing heavily in plants, but the problem is those plants are dying, right? Is that the ultimate problem you solve? Right?
That's the next slide. Yep.
Yeah. So So I would try and, I would try and just say the problem we're solving is, people are going nuts for house plants and gardening, but they're not very good at keep alive, right? That's kind of the headline.
It's already giving me ideas of combining that slide with this one.
Yeah.
Because
always try and
that's
combine
exactly.
slides. Yeah, remember, people love to say how many slides, and they think there's this like magic silver bullet number. It's 12 or it's 14. It's typically, right, in my example, if you take out the cover slide, the 2 highlight slides and the contact slide, it's like 10 slides. But it's really as many as you need. And if you need more than one to cover the problem or the solution, you'll notice in my example, I had 2 slides for product because I had 2 different stakeholders. But as a general rule, it's a good discipline to try and boil down your takeaway for each topic to a single slide.
Yeah.
This is good. Yeah, honestly, I would combine these 2 with this graphic, right?
Yeah.
Because there's right, and right, it could be consumers are increasingly, are investing heavily in plants and gardening, but they can't keep those plants alive, right? That's one side, and then, these 3 things here. Make sense? I do like the numbers.
Yep. I like it.
I'm a big fan of show and tell, and fewer words and more. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I may have to my son's dealing with somebody at the front door. Be right back. A typical moment, right? I'll be 2 seconds.
Love it. Yeah.
Best, what was your favorite moment on Shark Tank for the folks that are still sticking around here while we have a little
I'm back, by the way, guys.
break in the programming. Oh, okay. There we go. Never mind.
Oh, never mind. All good.
The other thing, Abash, I would do
teaser.
is I love these stats. Stats are great, especially when they're relevant to the problem statement. I would put a source for each one of these.
Yeah, I used to have a source for that, but it got lost, I think, in some of the new versions. So I got to put that back in. It's a good catch.
Yeah, and it can be teeny tiny, right? It can be number 1, 2, and 3, and it's tucked away down here, right? It doesn't have to, it can be very subtle, but people want to know where these numbers come from because they're going to want to check your numbers. Maybe not here, but certainly for your market sizing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got a different problem statement, which is the industry is stuck in the past. I feel like you've got 3 problem slides and you need 1. I feel like the problem is, hey, people are really getting pretty giddy about plants and gardening, but they don't know how to keep those plants alive, right? So prove that they're getting giddy, right? They're investing more and more time, energy, money into it, and provide some stats that prove that they keep the plants. Solution, and plus, perhaps, there's an element of they also want to connect with like-minded individuals, right? But I might say that. Remember what I said about the dating profile. Don't say everything. Just say the highlights, and you can get into the detail with the handful of investors that want to learn more. So this one's too much, and the TAM is just come out of nowhere. This is a very good. I wouldn't be talking about TAM until I get to the market sizing, quite honestly, other than I would have talked about it on the highlight slide. So now we're into the solution. Again, I would just say solution. All-in-one consumer platform. Yeah, platform doesn't. It's an app. It's an app, and it's a plant health tracker, right? In plain English.
Yep.
Show the app, show the tracker. I'd probably just say it's an app plus a tracker. I wouldn't have this here. It's that plus that as the high level. Freemium, so that's good. We'll be talking about that in the business model, hopefully. IoT, you know, it's a tracker. It's a connected tracker. Hyper-personalized add-ons. Just a lot going on here, Abash. I would definitely try and get a far fewer words on this. And one thing I would recommend to folks, if you really want to see an extreme case of pitch deck brevity, you can actually find it on my website. It's under resources. This guy did a pitch deck. He's actually the founder of Optimizely, and he started Rewind AI. And last year he raised 300 million with a pitch deck that he did not send to a single investor. Instead, he built the deck, which is like a 40-slide deck, and he presents it on a YouTube video in less than 8 minutes. And there's just a handful of words on each slide or pictures. It's an average reading grade of 8th grade, and he was massively oversubscribed. So you may not be able to achieve that level of brevity, but it's useful to look at it, to look at every one of your slides, and you want to be saying, what can I take off this slide? When I remember what I said, we've got a key takeaway, then we need content that amplifies and supports the takeaway. And look at your content, and if you're trying to clean your slides, think about what's primary to that goal, what's secondary, what's tertiary, and take away anything that's secondary and tertiary. So the private label plant care add-ons, that almost feels like it's a bit too much right now. It's an app and it's a tracker.
So a question for you on that, because for a long time we were raising on the premise of just the app and the IoT device. The reason we've been kind of pivoting to this new vision of, hey, we become this all-in-one platform, the big takeaway is that we're also providing all these, add-ons that people are actually coming back to us for, extending customer LTV by a significant amount. So people are getting our own private labeled fertilizer, plants. It becomes this sort of all-in-one source for all things plants and gardens. And the reason I ended up adding this back into the solution slide and part of the deck is feedback from investors. There's some aha moments during pitches where the second we mentioned Chewy for plant parents, the fact that we're really extending customer LTV by essentially kind of, engaging and acquiring customers through the app and the hardware, but then extending that LTV through the private labeled add-ons. That's kind of the big moment where several investors have said, like, okay, yeah, that really interests us, and that's something we definitely want to look into. If that's more of a secondary kind of point in your opinion.
Now that you say it like that, I do think it's important. So I would say it's an app plus a tracker plus a marketplace. Or you don't have to say marketplace, but everyone, when you say marketplace, people understand that you're a middleman, that you're helping people that want to buy plant-related products and services and people that provide plant-related products and services, and you're going to be the matchmaker that sits in the middle and basically takes a piece of every transaction between those two stakeholders. And so essentially you're Etsy or eBay for for houseplant products and services, right? So that's interesting. That's almost bigger than it's easier for me to understand that you're eBay for plant products and services or Etsy for eBay plants and products. So it's easy for me to understand that than private label plant care add-ons. Does that make sense?
That does. The issue is that that's not the ultimate end all be all, because while we are, let's say, drop shipping products, that's the extent of us being really a middleman. So we don't want to become purely a matchmaker and getting third parties, and selling any sort of plant care product and gardening product. The goal is that we keep adding our own line of products that make sense to upsell for consumers. And that's where they get that added value and not having to shop around to, a Lowe's or a Home Depot or Amazon. Instead, we provide the storefront essentially of our own private labeled goods,
Got it.
such as fertilizer, water misters, and all that. So it's more of a storefront versus like a matchmaker and eBay for plant parents in that sense.
So it's funny, right? So before you said storefront, I crossed out marketplace and put e-commerce store. So
Mm-hmm.
so whatever so there's a lot of words here, but if this said consumer app and this said plant health tracker and this said e-commerce store, I would, assuming I understand, I'm looking at this for the first time, but
yeah,
you want to boil it down so it's as easy to digest as possible. Does that make sense? You could always add
yep, that does,
some
yeah.
amplifying detail, but if this said flora equals consumer app plus plant health tracker plus e-commerce store, I would say that that's faster and easier to consume than this. So
Yeah,
sometimes
agreed.
It's words and labels, and less is always more. But that I do agree. I think that's a very, very interesting. This becomes essentially this is the top of your funnel, right?
Yeah,
This and this is
exactly.
the top of your funnel, and where you may hope, if we were to look at your revenue, we might see that premium 2-3 years from now, premium subscriptions and sales of the health tracker might only be 10-20% of your revenue, and 70-80% is coming through the e-commerce store, right? In the beginning, it's skewed the other way, but this is why you're investing in us. Now, I would consider a marketplace, because I think if you became the Etsy for all home gardening products and services, I think that would be pretty amazing. Right? You could connect people up with local garden designers, with just local plant health specialists, or even just like-minded individuals, which is more the community aspect over here. But anyway, does that all make sense for the solution?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Yep.
All righty. Traction, this is great. Whenever I do so here's what I like to the engagement is great. Now this I love this, right? People are spending more time on Flora than Twitter. I'm not sure Twitter and Twitch are comparable. I don't know how you compare to Instagram. Or what would be a better comparison, right? Because this is a special interest. Twitch is a good one.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a gamer, you're on Twitch.
Right. It just depends on the Apptopia report. We were really limited in what we could draw from. So we decided to go with similar consumer social media apps. I'll take a look at the report again, but the only other one is something like Strava is a great example. And I think they were actually closer to our engagement. But yeah, when I tell people the idea of how we're a subscription premium driven app, but driven really by community, engagement, we have like our own social media feed of people sharing their plants. It's very similar to what Strava has done, very similar to what All Trails has done. Andreessen Horowitz did this long study of how these are the apps that are really winning in the app space, in the education app space, because they have these virality factors of engagement and community kind of built in to the hobby itself. And that's exactly what we've done. So I'll try to dig around for the data on some of those similar comparable apps, because I think you're right. It'll flip the switch on more for investors to see, oh, that's what they're kind of chasing after, and that's what they're similar to.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I said you're like Fitbit for plant lovers, but Fitbit, they got acquired, but it's not Strava for plant lovers really makes sense to me, because there's an app. That app connects to tracking devices. In my case, it's my Apple Watch. I use Strava every day. It's a hugely successful company. So just saying Strava for plant lovers and then using the Strava engagement comparison. And I wouldn't just do the engagement. I do like the engagement per user. But the other thing is I like to see signups ramping up, but I also like to see
Mhm.
daily active users ramping up, right? Because it's not enough for
Right.
people to sign up for the app. You need to say people are interested enough to sign up for the app, and then they're also interested enough to use it on a daily or a weekly basis. And then you add
Mhm.
the minutes of engagement per user, right? Because the problem with
Right.
engagement per user could be that it's one super engaged user, right? So when you put all
Yeah.
three together, I think that's really useful. The app rating is very good. The CAC is interesting. Almost needs a calculation there.
Mhm.
Because it's freemium, so it's like, okay, well, some people aren't paying anything. So anyway,
Mhm.
a lot to work with this, but this is, I think you've got a lot of great stats that could be boiled down into a very strong traction slide, which also, by the way, so remember our highlight slide? We've got
Mhm.
315,000 users with an average daily engagement that matches Strava. That's a pretty strong
Mhm.
summary statement for traction on your highlight slide, right? And and on
Right.
the product slide, you could say, you know, 4 point, it's a consumer app and tracker plus e-commerce store. App has 4.7 app rating. These are just little bullets you can put on that highlight, which are just setting the stage for the more detailed slide like this one that would come a little bit later.
Yep.
But great stats, great stats.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, AI powered plant monitor, Venus flytrap for retention engagement. I think these are more retention again, more traction. I would take the
Mhm.
best of these three and see if I could boil it down to a single super powerful action
Mhm.
slide, and possibly two slides, one which is traction and the other which is unit economics, that just does the
Mhm.
LTV. What, like, for example, what percentage of free users convert to premium, right? What's the,
Mhm.
what's the average annual revenue for a premium user, and 12 months after they first sign up as a paid subscriber, we got 94% retained, and they're spending an average of XX dollars a year, something like that. So I would
Yep.
take these three and create a super strong, boil all this down to a really amazing traction slide, which you've got. And in your case, because you are post revenue, I'd have a unit economics. It doesn't hurt to, this is an example where I would add a slide that I didn't have in my template, and it would be the unit economics. The investors love to see
Yeah.
that.
Makes sense.
Every plant has different needs. Are we starting? Is this competition? See, it's what you
So
don't
this
have.
is still, this is where I got to combine. Yeah. This is more the
Yeah,
e-commerce storefront slide.
yeah. So I would say, so if we said the product equals app plus track plus e-commerce, then we can have a slide on the app with the traction metrics and perhaps the unit economics, a separate slide on the tracker with the upsell, cross-sell opportunities, and then a third slide on the e-commerce. So it's product dash app, product dash tracker, product dash e-commerce store. So we're still
Gotcha.
doing,
I got to make that more evident.
yeah.
Yeah. Because,
So it's
yeah,
product,
that's what I
it's
tried to do
problem.
here. But
Yeah, because you aren't including the topic, you're making
Mhm.
me try and infer what is this slide about. See, every slide, there's two
Right.
questions. What is it about? And what do I need to remember from this slide? What it's about is the topic, product, solution,
Mhm.
competition, go to market, whatever. What I should remember is the title. So you need both. Make sense?
Yep. That does. Yep. So like product app, product tracker, product e-commerce, like you mentioned. Yep.
Yeah. So remember, I had for Gleamer, because the two key stakeholders, it was the same app, but there was, in my case, I broke it out by stakeholder. So I said, here's what it looks like and how it works for consumers, and here's what it looks like and how it works for stakeholders. In your case, we'd have 3 slides, but we're not breaking it out by stakeholder, we're breaking it out by solution component. And you have 3 components. There's an app, there's a tracker, and there's a store, an e-commerce store. So I'd have a slide dedicated to each of these. And then the next one would have to be competition, because once I know all about the product, okay, well, who do they compete against? Right? What? Show me a table that says, here's the 5 things that consumers really need and want in a plant lover's app and tracker, or more generally, to solve the problem of how do I keep my plants alive and connect with other people that love the same plants that I love, right? What are the 3 or 4 key things that they would need? You obviously would have all or most of those. And then where else could they get some or all of those needs taken care of? How have they taken care of those needs in the past? How will they take care of them going forward? And I've got to believe there's other apps out there that do a little bit of what you're doing. They might not do the whole thing. So you might have e-commerce store as one of the solutions. You might say 3 of the solution requirements are an app for tracking the health of your plants, an app for connecting with like-minded plant lovers, a device for tracking the health of your plant and warning you when things are going wonky, and an e-commerce store that lets me, buy interesting products and services related to my love of plants. And you would be check, 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 right? You might be you used the phrase earlier, all in one. You might be the first all-in-one solution for plant lovers that combines a consumer app with a plant health tracker and an e-commerce store. Maybe that's your positioning, right?
The cover slide. Yeah.
So that can be. So you've got to identify who do you compete against, directly or indirectly, and how do they stack up against the 5 or 6 reasons why a plant lover would choose your solution over something else. Does it make sense?
It does. Yep.
All right. Now we're talking about the business model. Now I think I know now. You charge, you make money from premium subscriptions, you make money from sales of the tracker, and you make money from e-commerce transactions on your store, right?
Yep.
So you've got 3 revenue streams. So I would say we charge X amount per user for a premium subscription. We charge Y amount, Y dollars per tracker, and we drive Z dollars per e-commerce transaction. And that's it. That's how we make money. So we've got 3 revenue streams, and this is how much we make for each of those revenue streams. In the case of the e-commerce, it might be per transaction. For the premium subscription, it's per user. And for the tracker, it's per units sold. And, there's probably an average number of units sold per consumer, right? So if that was your business model slide, then your market opportunity slide would simply take those and say, okay, if we're charging, and I'll just make some numbers up. If we make $99 a year per consumer for premium, how many consumers do we think are out there? Right? Right. Let's call it $100 a year. If we think there's 10 million out there in the US, there's $1 billion of opportunity right there just for the premium subscription, right? And then if you charge, say, I don't know, let's suppose a tracker's $50 per tracker, and you sell an average of 2 per customer, and we've already said there's potentially 10 million customers, We've now got 50 times 2 times 10 million. Now we've got another $1 billion of potential revenue for the tracker, right? And then for the e-commerce transactions, you could say, well, there is, let's see, so for that one, you would say, what's the total market for plant-related products and services? Or maybe just products. If you're only selling products for now, you might say, look, it's a $5 billion market for, it's a $5 billion market for plants. And so basically we're not going to get, we're going to take a slice of that. We don't know how much yet until we kind of get the thing up and running. So it's 2 billion plus whatever slice of the 5 billion you can get, and that's North America only.
Yeah.
What you're doing here is you kind of, this is almost like, I want to see a P&L. If I'm going to look at this, I want to see a P&L. This is like a roadmap combined with right? I'd rather just see a P&L that says these are the 3 revenue streams in year 1, year 2, year 3. We estimate this number of premium users, this number of trackers sold, and this volume, this dollar volume of e-commerce transaction through the store, right? Year 1, year 2, year 3. So now you're showing your explicit revenue assumptions. And then in the operating expense, it's like, we're going to have this many engineers. So this is going to be our product development costs. We're going to have this many marketing and sales folks. So that's our marketing and sales costs, plus an amount per year for marketing programs. Plus, we're going to spend this much each year. We're going to have this number of customer support folks, year 1, year 2, year 3. Here's how much we think they'll cost us. And therefore, here's our payroll cost for customer support. So you're laying out essentially your staffing and program expense to support the revenue growth in the top half of your P&L. Does that make sense?
And
it
does. Just as a... Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish that thought.
So you're providing information in a format that the investor can digest.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to hear you just talk out loud, because then it allows, like, for example, my next slide after this is the unit economics slide, but obviously it makes a lot more sense to lay the groundwork of the unit economics leading into, that business model, as this directly feeds into how we actually build that model from the unit economics. I do have to jump here in a couple minutes. I have to actually go somewhere in person for a conference, but the last slide that I'd love to cover, if you're down for it, is the actual fundraising slide. And I think that's like one of the last slides there, right before the thank you. Yep, there we go. So would love to kind of get your thoughts on just like the final ask here.
Okay. So there's really, you've got a lot of the information. I think you could probably simplify it a little bit. But the 3 things I want to know is, in terms of how much you want to raise, how long will that last? What will you spend it on, which is this? I don't see how long it's going to last. Is that in here somewhere? Is it going to last 12 months?
So
18 months?
Technically at least 2 years, but the thing is that we're targeting profitability by end of this year, if not Q1 2025. And then staying profitable to keep fueling our growth afterwards. So a lot of advisors and investors have said, if you technically are just profitable, you can leave out like how long the fundraise is actually going to cost you, because there's no longer burn after a certain point. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I might say to fund the next. I still feel like, well, and of course, if you had a P&L, I would know when you were achieving profitability, because I would see it in the I'd see that it's year 3, right?
Right.
Again, I think this can be simplified. A lot of information on here. It's good to know it's $1 million, $7 million safe. This is hardware, product, personnel. Yeah. So typically the way people, I think, certainly the way I think about it, and I might be wrong. When I think about operating expenses, I think about a traditional P&L. I think of every income statement you can see on Again, I won't age myself, but Yahoo Finance and whatever the modern equivalents are. But basically, it's typically good broken out into sales and marketing, product development, and customer support. Now, I know you've got an extra piece, which is the hardware, so you might have operations somewhere. But personnel, to me, personnel is a non sequitur to product. Like, what's the overlap between, like, growth marketing presumably needs personnel, product development presumably needs personnel, so they feel like they're non sequiturs. Like, it feels like apples to oranges. Right. So typically I would group it by expense category. I know you need to go. And in that expense category, it's probably going to be payroll. And in the special case of marketing, it's also going to include program.
That makes sense. Directly from the P&L so that it's easy to follow and tie into the business model as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of dots that need to be joined between slides that people don't join. They make each slide almost like an island of information, but there should be through lines between different slides. I know you need to go, Abash.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me even go through this in public. I appreciate that. Feel free to connect with me privately and we can continue the conversation.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for all the advice. I'm really excited to work on this and follow up.
Yeah, phenomenal deck, Abash.
Yeah, it's a great
work.
It's a good looking deck, and I think it just needs to be boiled down a little bit. And yeah, pretty good.
Agreed. Excited for it. All right. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Good luck. Yeah, we'll close out here. Malcolm, I know we went 30 minutes over, and we had actually 7 other people stay with us that whole time. So appreciate
Thank
everyone
you for those that stayed.
On the 90-minute session. I think it was an incredible amount of information, Malcolm. A wealth of insights across the board. I was jotting down a lot of notes myself. So I really appreciate the time. Again, we'll send out the recording and summary to everybody that was here with us, that registered too, and the discount to Malcolm Services. If you'd like to connect with him, he would love to share information and insights. Coming up next month, we're going to be sitting down with Global Shares, a JPM Morgan company, to talk about cap table management. That will be on April 18th, I believe, and we'll send out the email there as well. We'll continue these sessions once a month. Look forward to staying in touch with everybody, and have a great rest of the day, and we'll all talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Justin.